And I'm sorry, Andrew, there really is no explaining America, no matter how much time you spend there. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that we're not in America, and in fact that we meet on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. But I also want to acknowledge that we come from many diverse traditions, and I want to pay my respects to all of your elders and traditions as well. And that is indeed one of the wonderful things about Australia, is the merger and the marrying of all our traditions and our ideas, and that is where I think innovation so often comes from and stems from, and that is what I want to talk to you about today. That's me. Oh, and by the way, I don't want you to stop trying to get to number one on the Twitter hashtags. Tag me in all your, take me to number one, guys, come on. While you're at it. What I want to talk to you about is we've heard so many incredible stories today. We've heard examples of innovation. We've heard a lot about the need for innovation, about this incredible challenge that we have as a community and the incredible people who are stepping up to that challenge. And so what I want to talk to you about is not a single goal, but in some ways an overlay across all the goals, which is our need to accelerate innovation in order to achieve them. I had a great taxi ride on the way here just before, and I told my driver, Walter, what he asked why I was going to NIDA, and I told him, and after I'd explained the SDGs, I told him what I was planning to speak about, and he said, that's actually very simple. And he spent the entire rest of the drive telling me his theories on how we can accelerate innovation. I thought, why did I even worry about preparing this presentation? If only I'd known Walter was going to be there for me, explaining to me what was going on, I could have relaxed. And Walter's theory, just to share with all of you, is that the problem is the instant gratification need that young people today have. And participation trophies. He's really fired up about participation trophies. And look, Walter's not right exactly, but he's not completely wrong either. And I'll talk a little bit about where he's right and where he's wrong as I go. Now, the reason this matters is because there's a lot to do, and we don't have very much time to do it. So one of the most interesting changes in the world today is the nature of change itself and how that has changed us. And so change is speeding up. There's more. I'm getting a bit out of sync with my slide. There we go. There's more of us. We're creating more content and communicating. We're more connected than ever before. And technology is changing around us faster than has ever occurred before in human history. And so this creates an innovation imperative, as in we have to innovate. It's not an option. It's not a nice to have. It's not a cool when it happens. It's something that we must do if we're serious about achieving the goals before us, particularly by 2030. And so that brings us to the question of how do we fund this work? What's the funding mechanism? How do we support the innovators for social change? We've met a bunch of them today, but are they rare or are they common? The sad truth is they're far too rare. And that's because we mostly don't fund innovation for social change. And so what do I mean by the fact that we don't fund it? I mean that we are obsessed with funding things that we already know will work when it comes to social change. The social change sector is filled with very well-meaning people, and anyone who has control over any budget and is tasked and given a mandate to do good, I know, because I've met many of them, takes that responsibility really, really seriously. And they're trying to do the most good that they can do. But how we've come to define the most good is the most good we can feel certain is going to happen. And so what's missing from this picture? What's missing is risk-tolerant capital, because that's what's required to really fund innovation. Innovation is risk. Innovation is literally things that we don't yet know will work. And we struggle with this in the social sector. It's not a coincidence that I founded StartSomeGood while living in San Francisco, because in San Francisco I was fascinated by why is this such a vibrant innovation ecosystem? What are some of the characteristics of a vibrant innovation ecosystem? And there's lots of historical reasons why Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. But the one that I became fixated on was that availability of risk-tolerant capital. That there was sufficient capital and sufficient appetite to try new things from people who had capital to fuel the experimentation that innovation requires. And it's been interesting coming back to Sydney, because I think from the outside, people can have really kind of mythic views of Silicon Valley and what happens there. And a lot of people can think it's where really smart people get together and do really clever things. And in fact, Silicon Valley is the world's largest collection of dumb ideas. And that is what an innovation ecosystem looks like. It looks like mostly things that won't work, and some things that work beyond all reasonable expectation. And so why is this so important? I've become fixated with this dynamic I believe occurs within innovation, which is that good ideas look like good ideas, but great ideas are disguised as bad ideas. So good ideas look like good ideas because they're sensible. They build upon our understanding of the status quo. They're like this, a bit like this, but better. And you go, oh, that's a good idea. That should be better, you know. And we've heard some cool examples of that as well, like bins on land, but in water. That's a good idea. That's a really cool idea. Why haven't we done that already? Good ideas are often characterized when you go, I can't believe we're not doing that. It seems like such an obviously good idea when we hear it that we're like spun out that it's taken until this moment in time for someone to come up with it. But great ideas look really different. Great ideas break the status quo in some way. They violate our expectations. They confound our beliefs around how things have to be or should be or must be. And this is why, interestingly, you know, I loved a lot of what was said in the last video and the last speech, but that idea of trying to separate what we want to happen and what we think will happen from investors ignores the fact that the act of choosing influences what will then happen. That's that pretense so many investors have. You hear it in those sorts of statements, that there is just some sort of neutral, that they are a neutral observer, that they are kind of interacting with the world from a neutral point of view, just trying to figure out what really will happen. But their choices are having a massive impact on what will happen. And it's interesting in some sectors where we're willing to be led by our desire about what will happen. If cancer research was subjected to the same expectations as almost any other field of social change, we literally wouldn't be doing any anymore. Because we haven't solved it yet. What's the ROI on not yet solving a disease? But that's not how we think about that at all. We think about that as an act of commitment, as an act of will, that we will cure cancer not because it is easy, but because it is hard and because we must. And in fact, that's also the imperative behind homelessness, behind poverty, behind climate change. We must solve these things not because they are easy, not because they stack up from an ROI perspective, but because we must. And so if no one, I don't think this has been named yet, so if no one else has taken it, I want to call it the Dawkins' Law. So did you want to tag, hashtag Dawkins' Law? It's a bit awkward because the apostrophe will break the hashtag. The Dawkins Law, maybe? Anyway, we'll workshop it later. Come talk to me afterwards. And so in Silicon Valley, this works because there's a category of investors known as angel investors. And they are mostly investing their own money to make absurdly high-risk bets. The expectation for most angel investors is that 90% of those investments will fail. 9% will maybe, do so-so. But the hope is that one of them will be Facebook or Airbnb or Dropbox. I shouldn't say no one, but we struggle to figure out that equation for social change. It's so much easier on the commercial side. It's why I always laugh at social enterprise events where they pretend that the business model is the hard part. No, the social change model is the hard part, guys. Business is actually very simple compared to solving real problems in the real world. And social change doesn't come down to one metric to rule them all, the way commercial innovation does. Does it make money? So it's easy to think about the trade-offs of 90 failures, but one of them needs to return 100x, and voila, we've paid for the portfolio, fantastic, we're golden. What does that look like from a social change point of view? Connected with that, our relationship with change has shifted. The fact that we have a relationship with change is part of that shift. That we have a culture of change-making now, an expectation that we will make a difference. And partly this is a post-prosperity world. You can only really get to this once your very basic needs have been taken care of. But as more and more of our very basic needs have been taken care of, we've begun to think differently about what comes after that. And so we've moved from a world where it used to be that the future didn't in fact change very much at all, to a future where important people made big decisions that changed the world. So from doesn't change to change happens, but it's like really important people that make change, to the world is shaped by me. The world is shaped by my decisions. And this is why we're seeing huge upswings in people who are looking for meaningful work, why 1,000 people applied to be the receptionist at Donors Choose, why Deloitte has measured purpose alignment as the single greatest factor determining whether new staff stay in their graduate staff stay in a company for 5 years or leave in under 2. And it's driving, of course, the rise of the social enterprise sector as more and more people are looking to align their consumption decisions and their daily decisions that you have to make with the impacts that they want to have on the world. And this is really different. This is a huge shift from the old model of making a difference, which was based on giving back. Might be before most of your time, but back in the day, people used to talk a lot about giving back. Anyone about younger than me doesn't talk about giving back at all, because we don't want to make an impact just at the very end of our life, after we've just sorted ourselves out for the first 80 years. And now it's time, just before we die, to worry about the future. I mean, that's kind of crazy, isn't it? The time to invest in the future and worry about the future is actually right now, while we still have a moment to enjoy it and appreciate some of the impacts, some of the future that we're trying to bring about. And so I always love that, so this is really different from how philanthropy used to happen and how change used to happen. And one of my favorite examples of this is this guy. Does anyone know who this is? Anyone? It's Alfred Nobel. You may know him as the guy who created a legacy, gave back by funding the Nobel Peace Prize. Do you know how he made the money, though? That went in? Dynamite, the inventor of dynamite. The guy most responsible for the destruction of the First World War is the person whose face is on the medal we give the greatest peacemakers in our world. How crazy is that? It's so bizarre. Congratulations, here's a coin with the inventor of dynamite's face on it. Thank God we're moving on from that and focusing more on what we can do today. And this is what's driving business as a force for good. It's what's driving the B Corp movement, which we're proud to be part of, for instance. And it's coming from both sides. It's that consumer preference, but it's also entrepreneur preference. It's that people who are willing to take those risks and undergo the torture that can be entrepreneurship at times are increasingly wanting to do so in order to create more than just private wealth. And what's great about that is that they're also creating private wealth a lot of the time. Ethical brands and impact brands are outperforming business as usual. And isn't that brilliant? And so when you think about the Millennium Development Goals, they're not just the world's greatest social challenges, they're also the world's greatest business opportunities. And they're also the place where we most desperately need innovation. And so not everyone is going to found a new social enterprise. We have to think strategically and courageously about how to leverage the resources that we do all have. So if you're in a position of a traditional business, you don't have to necessarily right now, you should eventually, but maybe right now you don't need to completely redesign your business around purpose. You need to start engaging with purpose in a more courageous, meaningful way. So that could mean awesome partnerships, like the Good Guys and Orange Sky, who are a mobile laundry service. I just think that's such an awesome alliance. These guys literally are using white goods to change the world. I love this one as well. This is Sea Shepherd, one of the world's punkiest environmental organizations, one of the most radical, collaborating with Adidas to make sneakers out of recovered drift nets. Or it could just be that you're sitting on office space, which is expensive and rare, and offering it to free to awesome startups to come in and work under your roof, increasing that, that connection between you and the innovators. Or it could mean running a full-on accelerator to disrupt your own sector, such as CPA have done with the Remarkables Accelerator. And I just want to tell you a quick example of some work we do with ING, and you heard Lauren touched on it earlier, but it's a great example of how you can build this blended outcomes. Through the Dreamstarter program, ING is able to support very early stage social enterprises to launch and test their ideas. And to give a pretty typical example, last year's cohort was 7 businesses. 100% of them reached their funding goals. I should explain, ING puts in the first half. It's conditional on them raising the second half from the community. Because to do so isn't just more money, it's validation, it's momentum, it's evidence that the community really want what they are offering. This has gone dark, but that's cool. They turned $100,000 into almost $300,000, so the community overmatched. The community provided almost another $200,000, thanks to 1,666 individual contributors. So the end impacts for ING were pretty exciting. It meant they got to partner with these awesome, exciting entrepreneurial organizations. You've met a couple of them today, not just Words with Heart, but Bread and Butter Project as well. So they're the caliber of kick-ass social entrepreneurs that ING get to interact with and, be part of their story. It generates a lot of staff pride, it generates a lot of customer engagement, and they've actually measured the pure commercial returns, just on pure brand building and customer engagement, at 21x what they spend on the program. And over the last 7 years, we've put almost $2 million into early stage social enterprises together. But it's not just with businesses, we've done this with foundations as well, such as English Family Foundation, supporting 8 early stage social enterprises, same model. We've done it with local government. And so we do it for anyone who's looking to help unearth and inspire and skill up and launch social impact projects within their particular area of passion or interest. Because this is where Walter is right. We can't just be conscious consumers. That's the instant gratification of social change. And to think that you can switch from buying one brand of bottled water to a different brand of bottled water and pat yourself on the back as a change maker is the participation trophy of social change. You actually have to do the work of cutting out bottled water at all, because there's no excuse to buy water in single-use plastic, almost ever. If you're dying in a desert, I'll give you a pass. But if you're not, don't do it. It doesn't matter if it's a social enterprise. It's a behavior that we simply shouldn't be engaging in. And so we need to move beyond the simplicity of conscious consumption and look at conscious entrepreneurship, conscious innovation, and how we use all our resources to come together and build the world that we want to live in and leave to our children. Thank you.